Welcome back, UPSC aspirants. Look, as you prep for one of the toughest exams out there, getting your foundational polity concepts completely dialed in is just non-negotiable. So today, we're bringing you a highly focused explainer on the Union and its territory. We aren't just going to rattle off a list of facts. We're going to break down the exact constitutional mechanics and those historical timelines that are absolute gold for your exams. So let's jump right in and get that crucial conceptual clarity you need on Part 1 of our Constitution.
Here is our quick roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll decode the nuanced difference between the Union of India and the Territory of India. Second, we'll unpack Article 3 and how state boundaries are altered. Third, we'll look at acquiring foreign territories post-independence. And finally, we'll track the history of state renaming.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Union versus the Territory of India.
Article 1 famously states, India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. Now listen closely here, because we're starting wide with these foundational definitions for a very good reason. The phrasing in our Constitution is highly specific, and honestly, misunderstanding it is a super common pitfall. You see, during the Constituent Assembly debates, there actually wasn't unanimous agreement on the country's name. Some members advocated for the traditional name, Bharat, while others pushed hard for the modern name, India. So the Assembly adopted a mix of both to honor our heritage alongside our modern identity. But it's really the second half of that sentence, Union of States, where we need to focus our attention today, because that defines the very nature of our entire polity.
This right here is the absolute crux of the matter. We've got two distinct terms that people constantly, mistakenly use interchangeably, the Union of India and the Territory of India. So the Union of India comprises only the states. That's it. These states are the members of the federal system, they share power with the center, and they have their own elected governments and distinct constitutional roles. But the Territory of India? Well, that is a much wider expression. It includes all the states, absolutely, but it also adds the Union territories and any newly acquired territories that the government of India might add at any future time. Those UTs and acquired territories are directly administered by the central government without that standard federal sharing of power. Understanding this difference is just vital. It really highlights the jurisdictional extent of the country's sovereignty versus its internal federal structure. Definitely mark this nuance down for your mains answers.
Moving right along to Section 2, Article 3, and altering state boundaries.
So, you might be wondering, how exactly can the center manipulate our map internally? Well, while Article 2 deals with admitting completely new states that are already part of the Union, Article 3 is all about internal readjustments. The Constitution gives exclusive power to the Parliament to reorganize states internally. I mean, Parliament can form a completely new state by separating territory or uniting two or more states. It can increase or diminish the area of any state, alter its boundaries, and even change its name. It is a staggering amount of centralized power over the destiny of the states. But, as vast as this power is, it can't just be exercised on a whim. There are some very strict procedural rules acting as constitutional checks.
Article 3 actually lays down two mandatory conditions that have to be met before reorganizing a state. Step 1, a bill contemplating these changes can be introduced in Parliament only with the prior recommendation of the President. Step 2, before recommending that bill, the President has to refer it to the state legislature concerned so they can express their views within a specified period. You've absolutely got to memorize these two steps for your exams. The gravity of the President's role here acts as a crucial gatekeeper. An ordinary member of Parliament can't just wake up one day and introduce a bill to carve up a state. It must come with the executive's highest blessing, which kicks off a highly structured conversation between the center and the specific state in question.
But here's the massive constitutional twist. The President and Parliament can completely ignore the state's views. Seriously, even if the state legislature unanimously votes against the alteration of its boundaries, the Parliament can still just go ahead and pass the bill. Their views are entirely non-binding. If Parliament decides a state should be divided or its borders shifted, it's going to happen, regardless of any local legislative opposition. This heavily underscores the unitary bias of our Constitution when it comes to the survival of existing states. What it fundamentally means is that India is an indestructible union of destructible states. The states literally have no territorial integrity guaranteed by the Constitution.
Okay, let's take a quick mental reset here. We've talked about the theory, but how has India practically utilized these sweeping constitutional powers since independence? Our map has been redrawn countless times since 1947, transforming a really complex patchwork of princely states and provinces into the streamlined linguistic and administrative units we recognize today. So let's transition out of constitutional theory and into India's actual political history.
Which brings us to Section 3, Acquiring Foreign Territories Post-Independence.
Let's dive into how India exercised its sovereignty to expand that wider territory of India we talked about earlier, specifically through external acquisitions using international law. As a sovereign state, India can acquire foreign territories according to recognized modes, things like cession, occupation, or conquest. First up, let's talk about Puducherry. This territory comprises the former French establishments of Puducherry, Karaikal, Mahe, and Yanam. The French actually peacefully handed over these establishments to India back in 1954, and it was later officially made a union territory. Then you have the incredibly dramatic story of Goa, Daman, and Diu. India didn't acquire these Portuguese territories by treaty? Nope. Despite years of intense diplomatic pressure, the Portuguese flat out refused to leave. Ultimately, India secured them through a decisive police action in 1961, famously known as Operation Vijay. They were initially constituted as a union territory, and Goa was later conferred full statehood in 1987. You really need to know these historical narratives, the former colonial powers involved, and the specific methods of acquisition. It's prime material for matching questions in the exam.
And finally, Section 4, the history of state renaming.
Let's quickly track the history of internal rebranding under Parliament's Article 3 powers. The names of several states and union territories have changed over the decades, very often driven by deep-rooted linguistic pride and the broader process of decolonization. Make sure you lock in this chronological timeline. In 1969, the state of Madras was officially renamed Tamil Nadu to reflect the powerful linguistic identity of its Tamil-speaking population. A few years later, in 1973, Mysore became Karnataka, fully embracing its historical and cultural roots. Now pay special attention to 1991. The Union Territory of Delhi was redesignated as the National Capital Territory of Delhi by the 69th Constitutional Amendment Act. Note that this did not confer full-fledged statehood. That is a highly testable distinction for your prelims. The 69th Amendment created a really unique administrative hybrid, granting a legislative assembly but retaining central control over key areas like police, public order, and land. And more recently, in 2011, Orissa was officially renamed Odisha, basically correcting a colonial-era anglicization to better match the local phonetic pronunciation. And remember, Parliament executed all of these changes using those exact Article 3 powers we discussed earlier.
So we've covered the expansive definition of the territory of India, the potent powers of Parliament under Article 3, and the historical reality of our constantly shifting map. But as India's internal map continues to evolve dynamically, what constitutional boundaries or state names do you think might shift next? Think about the recent reorganizations you've been seeing in the news. As future administrators, you need to keep a close eye on these developments, because the territory of India is very much a living, breathing project. Keep studying hard, make sure you review these constitutional nuances, and I will see you in the next explainer.